Time for VUC. In our 11th year, with us on our journey this year, Simwood.com. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telco. Greenfield Tech. Go to greenfield.tech and see how they can make your tech dreams both feasible and affordable. Our conference bridge is the best you'll ever find at zipdx.com. VUC.me is hosted on Bluehost. And our worldwide local rate dial-ins are provided by voxphone.com. All right, you heard it right. This is VUC660 in our 11th year. And Corrado just joined us. Let's have a hand of applause for Corrado. We are going to be talking about something that is a payment system, but not a crypto payment system. It's Thaler, and Thaler is represented today by Christian. We're going to welcome him, first of all. Thanks for joining us, Christian, and be sure to unmute.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Now, the reason you're here, as we were just talking about this, reminiscing about our famous RMS session, and Richard said, you've got to go see Thaler. So we did, and we wrote, and this is funny how both with Richard and with you guys, it was a probably 11-week process between the initial contact and the actual session. So I'm not going to delay it any further. Christian, you know that we ask people about, we're talking about Thaler, by the way, is TALER.net. Won't delay this any further. We want to ask you right away the bio question. How did you get into technology? What brought you into it? What kind of intellectual curiosity made you do all this?
Well, I mean, I started very early. My father was an electrical engineer, and we had a computer at home when I was 6 or 7 years old. And around that time, I, of course, using those computers in the past of the Commodore 64, you kind of, start to do a little bit of typing, and you immediately have to do a bit of programming. And when I was like 8, I think my father got a first PC and had a book on Pascal, and started programming then, and started to write code to help me with my homework. Basically having my computer solve my math problems for me instead of me solving them every single time. And well, in high school, I sold the software to other students, pupils in the same classes, and well, then studied math, learned about the internet once I went to the university, and then decided, once I learned about the internet, that it was horrible and broken. And in 2001, we then started the GNU-net project, where we're trying to build a network that is better for privacy and more decentralized, and all of addresses the security issues that are on the internet because it doesn't use crypto. And then in 2013, we knew that the payments system was, of course, a big issue for the internet. And at the same time, in 2013, Chom's original patents on electronic payments with digital coins had expired. And so it was the time that we could realize a free software solution for the electronic payment system that wasn't encumbered by patents, and that would satisfy our ethical and social goals. And very early on, around the same time, was already maintaining a couple of GNU packages, so was in communication with Richard, and he asked me lots of questions about various altcoins and bitcoins and so on. And I mentioned to him, well, look, we've been working on this Thaler project here, and he was immediately hooked. And so we became, with the very first release, became GNU Thaler. And it's part of kind of an outgrowth of the GNU-net project. We're trying to rethink the internet. Yeah, so that's roughly the path.
Okay, perfect. By the way, what is the relation with INRIA?
Very simple. I changed job to become employed at INRIA, and as part of my job application, I said I wanted to develop Thaler into a viable product. And they said, okay, we'll hire you for that. And so they paid me for 3 years and paid a software engineer for a year and a half in the end. And are still hosting my PhD student who is working on this. yeah, so that's where INRIA comes from. So basically, we had the technology kind of worked out, the protocols worked out, but doing the actual implementation was work I did while I was at INRIA.
Okay. INRIA is involved in lots of research. I think the R may even be research in INRIA. What does INRIA stand for? This is a test.
Institut National de la Recherche en Informatique et Automatique. That's a French national research lab.
Right. So and that's what they do. It's kind of encouraging to see somebody's tax euros going into something that of interest, because a lot of that goes.
It's very funny. So it's
aside from research.
Lots of Americans immediately picked up on, oh yeah, clearly it's the French paying for a system that has the name taxable in it, because TALR stands for taxable anonymous legal electronic reserves, and the notion that one might want to pay taxes with a payment system is something that upsets quite a few Americans sometimes.
And yet that's what's going to make it viable. Yeah. Okay. So let's hear about this, and we really need to have the, as Randall Schwartz would say, the 6 mile up view of it. In other words, you have to start from the beginning of what this actually means, what kind of payments and so on. So how can we do that from the ultimate beginner?
From the ultimate beginner, I think the easiest way to think of it is, cash, except for it's digital. So like when you, from the user's perspective, right? So from the user's perspective, it really behaves like cash. You get yourself an electronic wallet, which is just a piece of software you install. You go to your bank, just like you go to an ATM usually, you authenticate there, you withdraw your digital cash, just like you withdraw, dollar bills. It's the same denomination, it's just a different representation. Instead of numbers in your bank account, you have at the ATM physical cash, and now you have electronic coins. The electronic coins are stored on your computer in your wallet. If your computer gets stolen, you lose your electronic coins. Of course, you can make backups and certain things you couldn't do with paper bills, but in principle, it's now on your computer, the value, but it still remains in dollars or euros or bitcoins. It doesn't quite matter. And then when you go to a store, you effectively hand over the electronic coins. It's a bit different, slight differences there, and the store then has the money. The main difference happens kind of at this point, which is that the store has to give the electronic coins back to the bank immediately. He can't go and pay the next store with them. And so that's a difference to physical cash. So that's where the analogy breaks down. From that point on, it becomes a bit more like a credit card payment, where the store has to go to the payment processor and say, hey, I just got this money, please send it to my bank account. And so the cash analogy is good because it shows, as a customer, when you pay at a store, you don't have to authenticate, you don't have to show who you are. You can be anonymous, you can be untraceable, you just spend your money. Whereas on the store side, we said, okay, we want to make sure that your income is transparent to the state, that the state can say, okay, this is a legal business, I'm not going to be extorting somebody for unlocking their hard drive, which I encrypted with some malware. It's a legal business. The state can say you have to owe us sales tax, you have to owe us income tax. We don't say how high the taxes should be or what they should be for. We just say the state can see you got some money and make sure that it's legal. And so in that sense, it's digital cash from the consumer side, but it's a bit like a normal digital payment system from the merchant side. And the other differences are, of course, it's we do use crypto. You said before, it's not cryptographic. Well, it's not a cryptocurrency, because it doesn't create a new currency. There's no money creation. You still have to have some central bank or some blockchain construction create your money somehow. But what you do have in the end is you have cryptographic proof of what happened. So the merchant can prove that he got paid. You as the customer can prove that you did pay. You have a signed electronic contract between merchant and customer where both people have signatures on it. Except the customer doesn't sign with his identity, he signs with his coins. So use a bit of a trick here. When you spend coins, you actually sign with the coin saying, this coin is spent on this contract. And thereby, if you have that coin and you can prove possession of it, you can prove that you bought the item without having your identity tied to it. So that's the high level view. And
okay.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, that's a high level view. Anything that is technical, I think we should do the demo first. But if you had stuff that wasn't super technical, we can go on with that.
No, it would be a bit more technical if you want to, you know, well, if for those people who know a bit about crypto, the good privacy comes from the fact that we use blind signatures when we were drawing the coins. That's basically the patent that Chom had, or the idea that Chom had in 1983, and that was patented that one would use blind signatures there. So it's a very well understood old cryptography that just was patented, and that kind of limited adoption for a long time, because anybody who would go into this market would effectively be blocked by the patent being owned by somebody, potentially suing them once they were successful. And of course, now that the patent has expired, we can implement this as free software and kind of try to establish a standard that is not owned by anybody, where it's just a protocol, just like the internet is an open protocol, and everybody can participate in this platform, and they're not going to be tying their business or their national economy to some company that can then charge arbitrary fees for doing something as fundamental as payment processing.
Christian, could I ask you just to expand a little bit on the concept of blind signatures? Because it's something that I don't think everybody will have met yet.
Sure. So a blind signature is basically like a normal digital signature, except for you don't know what you're signing. So you know that you signed one object, right? So it's a normal, in the end, it's a normal RSA signature. But what I do is I take the value I want you to sign, and I multiply it by a binding factor, give you that, and you can't compute back what the original value was without knowing this binding factor, which I'm not giving you. You sign it with your RSA key. It's actually a normal RSA signing process, also in terms of costs there. You send me back the signature, and I can kind of take the binding factor, operate on the signature, get a signature over my original value. And then I have an RSA signature over, effectively in our case, the public key of a coin. And you know that you issued one coin, but you don't know what the public key of the coin was that you just signed. And so you can effectively say, okay, I signed a €5 coin for Christian. So I deduct €5 from his account, and he has gotten one coin, but you don't know the serial number of the coin. We have music. So that's a blind signature. It's blind because you don't know what you signed. And in this case, all you care about is saying, I signed a coin. You don't care about what the serial number was. Is that clear?
Muted.
Yes, that's very clear. And that was an excellent explanation of it. And now I understand how that can be used. It's something I didn't understand before. So thank you for that, Christian. Sorry, Randy, I interrupted your flow.
Yeah, no, but I interrupted the flow because I never get phone calls here, and I just changed numbers. And so my phone rang, and I did a James. And James, you are now exonerated because you did nothing yet. You haven't done it yet. So if you keep a clean record, I'm going to send you a bottle of Sipsmith. Whoa. Okay, so I think a lot of this will be more clear with the demo, but do we have other questions or issues to cover before we try to step through this? Because this will be something that anybody can do theoretically, the demo. So it's open.
Yeah, and those who are listening, they should follow along, right?
Right, those of you who are listening, but if you don't have video, James is going to do hand signals through audio. Now, we're going to comment it, but the best thing to do is to go to taler.net, taler.net, and there's in fact, I will show this now to the folks that are watching.
You should use a recent browser. It works with very recent Firefox or somewhat recent Chrome or Chromium browsers, and you should go to demo.taler.net.
I'm actually taking it from the base of the site. By the way, if you can
find it from the links to you.
If you can't, well, I just want to show where it is. But if you can't find it, just use your favorite search engine, Alta Vista, to do that. Little joke there. I hope there was some laughter. Okay, so I'm on this page. Can everybody see this, guys? I am presenting, right?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, total silence. I had to go back to look.
We're all muted.
Yeah, all right, here we go. Well, good for you. Here we go. So I'm going to click on demo, which would have put me on demo.taler.net. How many languages are there, Christian?
Like 300-400, but not available in translation yet. I mean, we have actual translation of the website into Italian, Spanish, German, and very little of French, which is a bit embarrassing given that it was largely done at a French institution, but you know. I think for this audience, the fact that it's available in English should be good enough, right?
Totally.
And I add people do translations. It's simple. Get text, PO files. You know, let me know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Get in touch if you want your language to be translated and you think you can help. Incidentally, the language selection, however it works, maybe by browser preference, maybe by geo. I'll have to be in France to test this, but I was about to make a compliment, but then I realized that I'm in the United States, because I hate that when they do it by geo, because if you're in Germany, you get it in Germany.
We don't do anything by geo. We don't look at IP addresses.
Good. Right, of course we would. All right, so we're on this. Here's how this is going. Okay, correct. This is on the demo page, and the first thing you need to do is to go to to install the wallet on the installation page. Now, I've done this already, but I'll show you what happens when you go. It goes here. You select your browser, 51 plus. I'm currently on 60. You click on the install wallet. It happens, and it gives you a little T up in the bar. I'm going to just use the back button. All right, and then the next thing is to withdraw some coins. I'm looking for that link. Okay, and that's what this looks like. We go to the bank, just to make that clearer. Account number 83.
What you didn't say, Randy, is when you set the thing up, you get 100 kudos for free. I mean, they're reasonably useless, but you get 100 anyway for free.
But that is generous.
It is
very
extremely generous of you, Christian, to do that.
Yeah. I mean, this is our ICO, right? Everybody who creates an account on the bank page gets 100 kudos for free. Now, just to be clear, we basically are lacking a banking license, right? So if you want to do this in dollars, you kind of need to talk to, you know, the Federal Reserve and other people to have a banking license. Otherwise, you'd end up in jail. And because we didn't want to end up in jail, we preferred to put in kudos and figured people wouldn't confuse that for euros or dollars. But in the end, once we have worked out the legal paperwork and we're trying to get that done, it should be that you can go to your regular bank there or send money to the payment service provider or use a credit card or whatever, and then you would have dollars there or euros there or whatever else, right?
Right. And I did not have to register. You actually have to register and get an account before you do this. And that was the point of, Christian, you were telling me about reinitializing the browser. I probably should have used an incognito window to do this. But anyway, I already did register. It's a very quick and simple process. And now I'm going to withdraw.
We're not really asking for anything. Again, it's a privacy project. It's just we show what it would look like, right?
Right. No, I got that, and it's a good thing you underline it like that. So I'm going to now select my exchange provider, and I am not going to change it. I don't know. Does something happen if I click on the change? Probably not.
Of course, something happens.
Oh, okay.
Basically, you're allowed to put in a different URL in case there are multiple providers, right? It's like, you know, change between MasterCard and Visa card. The only thing is there's only one running that will accept kudos from this bank.
Which makes sense. So back to this. And now I'm going to accept the fees. By the way, the fees will be shown as so. It's like so. Good. And what was the other?
And just to be clear, the fees are fully configurable, and we just put in some, you know, seemingly random numbers to make it an illustration of that there could be fees for various operations that happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. And the overview, the auditor details are here.
So this is kind of the root of the public key infrastructure, like the certificate authorities that are in your browser. And this auditor is installed the public key as part of your wallet when you initially install it for the kudos currency. So basically, your browser says, okay, this is the regulator for kudos, just like whatever the US Federal Reserve might be for US dollars, or the European Central Bank might be for euros, And if that auditor has said this exchange is okay, we're checking their books, we're making sure they operate correctly, they are licensed to operate, you can trust them with your money. That's why you don't get a stern warning here saying, do you really want to work with this exchange?
And we've decided that we will. So let's go to accept fees and withdraw that sum, impressive sum of 20 kudos. I don't think I've ever had 20 kudos before. This will be a first. Then there's a little check of robotics. To prove that you are the account owner, please answer the following security question.
7.
What is
7.
4 plus 3? Oh, thank you. God, it's so embarrassing. I couldn't tell.
43,
Real bank should ask
surely.
Behave.
Yeah, wouldn't it be funny to go like 4 plus 3 and see if it's interpreted? No, it's not funny. I answered that, but it says a real bank should ask for a PIN or a TAN. What's TAN?
Transaction number, a unique number that authorizes a single transaction.
Okay. And by the way, we're at a good point to ask this. Would this be linked ever with security, which isn't great security, like getting an SMS with that TAN?
This depends completely on the bank. You're back on the bank side. If you look at the URL, now you're back on the bank side. And so the bank can play whatever authentication game it wants to play, be it SMS TAN, be it a PIN, be it having some external calculator. This is really no longer Thaler core, right? This is whatever the bank, you have to tell your bank to authenticate and approve a particular transaction.
Right. So this page is the bank's page?
Yes, you can see in the URL on top, this is the bank's page. The page before was the wallet's page, right? I mean, the user doesn't really have to know this, but as a tech, you of course understand that you care. Right.
No, but I mean, whenever you do e-commerce, you eventually do end up at somebody's bank page. Okay, and the withdrawal was approved, and I now have 79 kudos. Now I can go.
So this is what you have back in the bank. Now you should click on the logout button, top right.
Oh, really?
Just to, well,
I was going to go to
donations.
donations.
So it's associated with the bank, right? So at this point, you could go over Tor. You could, it's no longer going to be associated with your username. The electronic coins are in your wallet, and there's no more any tie to your bank account from the payment service provider's perspective in the future.
And I should have actually logged out before, now that I think of it. So if we want to go make a donation, wait a minute, how does this work? I have to, so where's the login?
You should go to the essay shop first, come on.
Okay. Well, we don't want to give Richard any money. Everything to be free.
Why not give him kudos, though? Just give him some kudos. He'll like that.
All right, that's true. So where is that link to give him the kudos?
No. Look, this is the idea, is that you are a journalist and you are a starving journalist. You wrote yourself a book and you're trying to sell your book, right, or your articles, right? And we have all of these paywalls are popping up, and the question is, what should a paywall of the future look like? How should you pay for the New York Times in the future?
Right.
All right. So scroll down, and this is kind of like the front page of your New York Times. These are all the articles that the starving people wrote. And now I decide, okay, I want to read the article. Now, don't scroll so fast.
Yeah, sorry, I was hoping to.
Selling free software. Doesn't that sound like the right topic today? Or pick the free software definition. Always great. Whatever. So now, basically, the shop says you have to pay for it. And look, if you look on in your URL bar on top, it says Chrome extension da. This is your wallet speaking now to you, right? So the site effectively answered with a 402 payment required status code, and told the wallet, this is what the user wants to buy. Show him that, if he wants to see this page, he has to pay 0.1 kudos. And the contract includes additional details like which payment service providers the site is willing to deal with, in this case, only one. And you as the user now have to confirm with the one click whether your wallet should pay this amount to this company for this contract.
Are we ready to commit to 0.1 kudos?
Throw all caution to the wind.
There was a little thing that happened there, but then there was a quick flash of something.
Yeah, you can see this in a second. I'll show you how you get back to it. So, so you bought your article, you get shown it. Now, if you click on the back button.
Back. Oh, back of the browser.
Yeah, see, you already paid for this article. So if you bookmark this page by accident or whatever, it tells you, well, you already paid for it, so you don't have to, you can click again on this and it won't pay twice.
Right.
And so, since the moment the payment happened, the page kind of changed. Now, if you go back one more, buy another article. So sometimes it goes a bit too fast for the audience, given that they're used to these credit card processing payments. And you can buy 5 articles in the time you do 1 credit card.
How about the manifesto?
Actually, the flow is remarkably similar to that of a credit or debit card transaction, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's very similar.
Well, simpler, I would say, though.
Well,
it's actually, I find it to be very similar. I do a lot of, well, and we all do a lot of payment online. Okay, this is also only 0.1 kudos. Wow, the prices in this place are excellent.
wait a minute. Sorry, just for clarification, Christian, who is making or taking that 0.1 kudos? It's the bank, isn't it?
The merchant is receiving the payment from you.
Yes.
So basically, your wallet takes a coin, signs it over to this, attaches to this contract, and sends the coin to the merchant, and the merchant sends it to the exchange, and the exchange confirms it's valid, everything is fine, and then the merchant marks in its database you've paid for the contract and gives you your goods.
Okay, but it's the exchange that is taking the commission on this.
The exchange will take a commission on it. That depends on the fee structure.
Yeah. So in many ways, it's not dissimilar to the way the credit card or debit card fee structure works. In that the credit or debit card company takes a fee for processing the transaction. Yes,
it's exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And it's also the protocol, the merchant effectively says, I'm willing to cover fees up to whatever, 0.01 kudos. And if you picked an exchange provider that had higher fees, then the wallet would tell you, well, the best fees I can come up with based on what you have in your wallet is 0.5 kudos. And the wallet only covers 0.3. Do you actually want to cover the purchase price plus 0.2 kudos to have all the fees? Right. So if you have an incentive to pick an exchange as a customer that has low fees, because if you pick a very expensive provider, then you might end up paying the fees as the customer.
Indeed,
right.
And this
so it's like with credit cards, where if you have a credit card that is charging too high fees, the merchant may not accept it in many cases. In this case, the answer would be that it would simply be added to your purchasing cost.
Yeah, one immediate advantage I can see of this is that it should be a lot cheaper and easier to set up an exchange. So one of the big issues with a current credit debit card system is that you actually have to be relatively large in order to set up that exchange mechanism, and that costs a lot of money. Therefore, the prices are kept artificially high. With this, the cost of setting up an exchange, I would imagine, is considerably lower. Therefore, there can be a lot more competition. Is that correct?
It should be considerably lower. Of course, you always have the regulatory costs, right? So just the banking licensing issues you won't get around because you're still a financial service provider. What is more important, you have much lower costs as the merchant, because there is no PCI DSS. Nothing can happen here. You as a merchant cannot cheat. There's cryptography that protects you. There's no possibility of fraud from the customer. The customer cannot, have his credit card details stolen because he's not, identifying himself. So because there's no possibility of fraud from the merchant or the customer, short of them being able to, break the cryptography, the operation is much cheaper on that side. And of course, it's an open standard, it's free software, which means we don't have this monopoly effect of MasterCard, Visa card controlling the market. Now, if you go back to the screen demo for a second, I want to show you one more thing. Don't see screen sharing enabled yet.
Okay, wait a second. You mean I'm not sharing the screen anymore?
Now you're sharing the screen. Yes, if you go back to the essay shop for a second. It's already went further.
Oh, essay, sorry. No, because I was trying to get an incognito window to show.
So go click on the free software definition again.
Right.
Because one of the things that, don't share the screen while you do it. Now you screwed it up. Nobody could see what happened.
Wait a minute. Where's the hangout? Am I not sharing the screen, folks?
Now you're sharing the screen, but the moment where you did something, where you clicked on it.
Only when you're speaking. You're not
I must
locked
have
in.
I must have had the focus disappear. Okay. But now you've got it.
So go back.
Should be in focus now.
No, it's not.
Back
Always
to
jumping up.
This?
Yes. Now click on whatever, the GNU Manifesto, one of the articles you already bought.
Mm-hmm.
You notice something missing?
Yeah, apparently it's not asking me to pay because I already paid.
Exactly. So now what is also interesting, if you took the link of the shop and sent it to one of your colleagues, it would ask the colleague to pay. Right. So
now we can do that because I have the incognito window. So let me.
Yeah. But so you see, it works very nicely. You can bookmark the page and go back to it without problems. You can share the link with somebody else, and then they would effectively ask to pay. So this works really nicely with the web. That was the only thing I wanted to show.
Okay. There was another thing that was going to be, that it was interesting that I got while, we need to go back here. While I was looking at other things, is to go do something that I haven't bought. Are these chapters, or these are papers that I can buy, right?
Yeah.
There seems to be a blizzard happening here. Hold on a second. Let's try something else.
Yes, whilst you're doing that, it's just worth flagging up. We've got some reasonably good questions popping up in IRC.
Let me see if I can change my screen to make it happen.
Let me go up higher. Try one of these. How about the forward? Is that for sale? Kitties don't seem to be coming. See, there's an initial.
Are we getting a DDoS attack right now?
Yeah, everybody, all the VUCs. No, interesting thing, because I just realized what this is that flashes, and that is a request for a CC number and so on. I don't know where that's coming from. Probably
that's basically if your wallet doesn't intercept the 402 request for some reason. Then the browser renders the normal body of the page, which is the credit card payment. So if you were to uninstall your wallet, then that is what would show.
And that, I was fooling around with the, while you were speaking, I was fooling around with the incognito window, and I wanted to show, but I'd have to change the focus here. So I wanted to show the registration process, which takes just a second. And if you don't register, then it shows that exact screen that I've already seen, the one about what's your CC number and so on. I don't seem to be able to get these to come up, though. Ah, no. See, it flashes, and then the page
isn't. What's going on there right now? See what happens on my side.
Can I say that I have that blank page myself? I'm playing along, and the same thing happens to me.
I have an idea of what's going on. Give me a second, guys.
Okay.
Is it
James?
Yeah, worthwhile just going back to IRC and just asking these quick questions, because we've got some good.
Yeah.
So Jervin on IRC has asked, can I assume that if you have multiple browsers on your PC, that you should stick to one browser in order to avoid having multiple wallets? Is that correct? So the wallet is tied to the individual browser instance. Is that correct?
For now, that is absolutely correct. Of course, in the future, we do want to have a way to synchronize wallets across devices and enable you to share your state across different machines, be it mobiles, be it browsers, or whatever.
Okay. Well, interestingly, Bong Frog, also on IRC, asked the same question, but we're using slightly different words. So he just asked, the common user now has his currency tied to a particular instance of the browser. Yeah, that could be a problem for people like me who tend to have lots of different browsers, and then I would instantly forget which browser I've got my wallet in, and I'd
Which
end up
browser and which device?
Yeah, I have multiple devices as well, which is a bit of a
so basically, our plan is that I mean, this is still version 0.3, and for the version 1.0, what we want to have is that when you install the wallet, it basically gives you a way to create a synchronization code, which you add. If you install a new wallet on another device, you can give it to that other device, and then the two wallets will be kept in sync by talking to some cloud service where an encrypted version of your wallet is stored. Right. So that still has to happen.
And one of the ways of managing this would be just to keep very little or no money in your wallet until you really need it, and you just drop it in there in order to make that transaction.
That's not exactly what you want to do, because if you get good anonymity properties, good privacy properties out if you withdraw some time ahead and keep a small balance in your wallet. But on the other hand, you also do not want to keep a huge balance in your wallet. So you wouldn't want to keep your personal wealth in your wallet. I mean, Bitcoin forces you to have everything in your wallet, but here the idea is it's treated like cash, right? You have enough in your wallet balance for your daily expenses, and if you have two physical wallets because you like to keep things separate, between business and private maybe, then obviously have two wallets, but don't carry a huge balance in your wallet. But on the other hand, also don't just withdraw the €14.25 when you are going to pay €14.25, because then of course it's very easy to correlate your purchase with your withdrawal, and then you don't get good privacy out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Andy, you had a question as well.
Yeah, I did. I mean, at the moment, I think you've pretty much answered this already, or what I'm expecting to the answer to be, by saying that you're at 0.3. So we're relatively early in the development cycle. But how do you see this working on mobile? Do you see people using this on mobiles, or only on PCs?
Well, we started with the PCs because, let's say, the web environment is a bit more friendly to what we wanted to do. On the other hand, it's also a bit more challenging to actually integrate this very nicely with the HTTP protocol and the various constraints browser security imposes on you. But in principle, you can pay over NFC as well. You just wouldn't get an HTTP 402 required, payment required status code. You would have to talk to your merchant terminal. And there the problem is, of course, we would have to convince the various point of sale systems vendors to enable Thaler as a payment method there. But in principle, it would be the same way that you receive the contract from the sales terminal, and on your mobile phone you get shown the contract, you approve it, it sends the payment, and then the point of sales terminal says, okay, thank you very much. And now there's two variants of this. If you have a situation where the merchant is not online, you could tell this to your mobile phone and say, by the way, I don't have internet right now. If you have internet, please, you process the payment with the exchange and give me the cryptographic proof that you did process it. Then you wouldn't send the coins to the merchant, and the merchant would deposit them, but your mobile phone could also deposit them at the exchange and only hand over the proof that it paid to the merchant. So this can also work if the merchant is offline and your mobile phone is online.
Okay, that's interesting. So more or less, you're saying that Thaler could become an Apple Pay, an Android Pay, in much the same way as Android or Apple devices. You use those payment methods on them today,
except for the oligopoly and the uncompetitive high fees that are likely to appear if you have an Apple Pay that is used to charging 30% for an Apple Store. So with having an open standard and free software and having privacy, it won't be feeding the monster that we have created in the form of Google and Apple. It would be something that would be way more socially friendly than whatever these systems could possibly evolve into.
At least you would hope that would be the case, yes. However, I could also see people adding charges to this and setting up exchanges.
Oh, just charges you can add to this, but if it's an open standard and anybody could operate an exchange, and you decide to charge 30% fees, and all I have to do is get myself a legal right to operate, to compete with you, you can't set your fees too high because then you'll get competition. Whereas if you have Apple Pay and you control the hardware, you control the device, you control the protocol, you've got patents all over this stuff, then it's very, very hard for any competitors to enter this market. You have to be one of these, top 10 big companies to even play in that market to push yourself into it. Whereas if we have a commons, if it's a free software implementation, where look, the exchange code is a Faro GPL. You can take it, you can download it, you can run it, and if you're legally allowed to operate it, then you can immediately go. And that's going to be a huge difference in terms of creating a competitive field here.
Okay. I also have another question. It's about browsers. I realize that, again, we're at 0.3, so there's much more to come. Are you planning support for Safari and Edge?
As far as I know, it works on Edge already. Don't have a Windows system. I'm a GNU, so I can't really test it. But if you go to
can someone try it?
On the web page, it says it works already for Opera. I think on Edge there was one problem with the Thaler menu icon that didn't render. But as far as I see, we had developers that said you can withdraw with it, you can pay with it, you just can't see a transaction history under Edge. So it's partially there. And so the real question is, for Safari, do you think Safari will support web extensions? And if not, then the next question is, I have no idea how to develop on Safari. I've never used it. But in principle, if we have enough money to fund that development, of course, we want to be everywhere.
I thought you might say something like that. And I have no idea how you do it on Safari either. So.
But look, we go by, what is the easiest and biggest things to support first, right? And then the idea is to branch out into supporting everything as much as possible.
I guess at this point, Chrome is the #1, correct? So that makes a good starting point. I just wanted to go back.
Web extensions is the #1 because it's very, very widely supported, and the differences between the Chrome and Firefox wallet are pretty much in the packaging and not in the actual code behind it.
Okay, let me just set this so it doesn't lose the focus. And I'm presenting to everyone just to show that once you've installed the wallet, which is indeed a one-click, at least at the Chrome store, I'm going to go withdraw coins. And this is the part we didn't see before. So I go to click on the link that says bank, and it asks for my login. And since I don't have a login on the incognito, where is it? Register link. I click register. Thought I did. Now, here's the extensive personal information that you're giving. I'll put my first name and my password.
Yeah, see, we're not going to get a banking license with collecting that information from people.
Of course. And my password, for anyone who wants to know, is password. Of course, now everybody can log in. Anyway, registration successful. Now I've got the 100 kudos. And then we already showed this part of the amounts. Now, there was another thing I wanted to go back to, Christian, on the other which I have to change the presentation, and that was the €5, the 5 kudo. Look at me, the 5 kudo exception, right? Because there's a very special thing.
Yes. So basically, what we wanted to show is that if you buy in a normal store with your credit card, it shows you one thing on the web, and what it does with the payment processing could be something completely different, right?
And let's see. So let's see if I can make this happen.
As I have to go to donations. You're totally on the wrong thing now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it was donation. All right, we'll go there. Right, because there's no €5. There's no. I keep saying euros. I'm so used to it. Donate. All right, we're going to go to 5. Now we go to donate, and again.
So this is where we could show that if you want to have an interaction where you want to pick a payment method, right? But now, so basically,
you added it one kudo. Oops. By the way, there's no cancel. You have to use the back button. There is no cancel.
Yeah, yes.
But I'm not going to accept because somebody stuck an extra kudo in there. I guess I have to go back. All right, in that case, if you're going to be that way, we'll go for 1.
Well, stay for stay for 1 second on the intermediate page here. There's a little bit to be said here as well. So on this page, obviously, you can show that you can ask the customer if he wants to pay via credit card or via Thaler or some other payment method before proceeding with the payment. And what is relevant here is that if the Thaler wallet is not installed, we basically expose one bit of information to the website. That is the wallet installed or not? So you could hide the option Thaler if Thaler is not available for your customer. So you know, some websites are implementing 20 payment methods, and they go and say, well, if we implement 21, that's getting a user interface nightmare. And so we decided we give you one bit of information we expose from the wallet extension to the website, which is that the wallet extension is present. And you can check that with either JavaScript or with CSS. So you can just add to your class list in the HTML, show this element or hide this element depending on the wallet being there or not. And that's the other important thing is you can disable JavaScript in your browser and the payment will still work.
Okay. So I think we kind of showed pretty much every step, although albeit not quite in order. But if you are listening to this and you're curious or you're totally lost, you'll have to go to YouTube to check it out. Very interesting. Other questions on IRC or on ZipDX or in your minds, panel? Everybody's muted, right? You should be.
Yeah, the obvious question to ask here is what has to be done in order to implement this in real life?
Implement this on which side?
Well,
and what do you mean by in real life? I'm not sure. This is real life.
Well, no, commercially.
The store.
At the moment, we have a demonstration system here which ably shows how the system could work in a commercial, in a real world deployment. But until somebody sets up a real payment gateway, an exchange, then it's not going to be real. So what is needed to set up that payment exchange and actually start making payments using this system?
Okay, well, you basically need two things. You need to have the business license, the banking license, or whatever financial payment service provider license that you obtain from your respective government. Or in the case of Bitcoin, you just skip that step, but then you're on a cryptocurrency. That's one of the advantages of not having regulation. It has disadvantages too. But basically, you need to, pick a currency and get your legal stuff together. And then the second thing is the exchange has what we call a wire plugin. And so the wire plugin is how you interact with the existing banking system. And it has to implement two basic functions, which is to see what transactions have been made to you, so you can see what money you got from customers that basically withdrew money at the bank. And the other thing is you have to be able to execute transactions to pay to the merchant. So the one is kind of to see the payments that went into your escrow accounts from the banking system. And the other one is to make payments from your escrow accounts to the merchant. So you have to implement those two functions, which is, the most trivial implementation you can think of. The one is, in case of Bitcoin, is watching your blockchain, or the other one is, in case of a normal bank, is see my incoming transactions, and the other one is make a transaction. So once you've implemented those two functions, and a couple of very, very simplistic helper functions like rounding. In case of dollars, you can only pay at the smallest denomination in cents in the banking system. So if Thaler supports paying sub-cent payments, you have to say, well, the smallest I can actually deal with in the banking system is a cent, right? So those kind of things you have to specify, but those are trivial. Then you can hook it up to the banking system and pay in what you call real life with it. And obviously, you also have to convince stores to support it. And if you go to docs.thaler.net, we have documentation for how to set up what we call the merchant backend, which does the crypto for you, and then provides you with a RESTful API for doing the payment processing. And then we have tutorials for how to do front ends right now for Python and PHP on that website. That explain to you how you would integrate this with your store, like you have to send this forward to payment required request response back to the web browser. And of course, we do have also documentation how to set up the exchange on that site already.
So that sounds remarkably simple.
Well, then do it.
Well, I would if I was a bank, but I'm not. But then again, perhaps I could be a mobile network operator and a bank, because the great thing about mobile network operators is they're quite good at taking money off people. But interesting thought. So, yeah, so what you need then, Christian, is somebody who is a bank or somebody who is very much into cryptocurrency to come along and actually do this.
Not cryptocurrency. Well, okay, cryptocurrency, if you want to hook it up to a cryptocurrency, yes.
Yeah, indeed. Something that...
With the cryptocurrency, you basically have to have somebody who is good enough to do it technically and crazy enough to try to do it legally without going to jail. Because, of course, you have the risk that, you know, this thing might be outlawed. They might accuse you of operating illegally, and cryptocurrencies aren't necessarily legal in all countries anymore. So there's some risk there.
Yeah, indeed. I'm very interested, because normally we have the odd banker or two listening in on this. I just wonder whether our favorite Swiss banker is actually listening there in the background. No.
For the bankers, I should say that basically, because when you withdraw, you have to authenticate. So we satisfy know your customer regulation. When you spend, the receiver is known and accountable to the state. So this satisfies anti-money laundering regulation. And because it's privacy by design and data minimization in every aspect of the protocol, we also satisfy the European General Data Protection Regulation that requires these things starting in 2018. So we designed the system to be, in fact, compliant with regulation.
Okay, I think this sounds pretty, well, it is very clever. And a big part of the cleverness in this, Christian, is the simplicity of the system. I
have to admit, I skipped one tiny point of the simplicity of the system that we had to fix. Basically, when you look back to the Chom's system of 1983, one of the things he couldn't do is he couldn't give change. So you had to have the right coins, so with the right denominations in the system. And so one of the really cool things is we can do change, we can give you refunds, we can handle protocol aborts, and that's all because we did some more fancy things to the crypto. But the great thing is you as the user never have to understand any of that.
Okay, to me, it sounds like you've got a brilliant idea all set up here. How are you going to sell it? Are you going to sell it?
Well, the idea is that we write it as free software. We're trying to find or create an operator for the system. And then, of course, the operator will run on fees. And then, you know, there's always services and support, be it developing for more platforms, helping the operator run it, tuning performance, and so on. And so that's what the community then has to do.
I understand. Yeah, it's one of the...
There's money to be made from fees, even if the fees aren't necessarily as high as 30% that, you know, some other providers might start charging eventually.
Indeed. Yes, it's one of the...
Yeah, sorry.
You go.
I have probably the usual very geeky question, going deep in the protocol. You mentioned that you use an HTTP 402 payment required for the extension to capture the request for payment, Christian. Is that affected by any kind of DNS resolver or any filters that might be in a home router that captures any kind of HTTP request that is not a proper OK request and tries to redirect to somewhere else or present a user-friendly page?
I am not aware of any of these devices interfering with HTTP status codes willy-nilly. I mean, 402 is a very standard HTTP status code. That, you know, it's ancient. I mean, it's 402 after all, right? So I'm not aware of anything, but of course you can imagine that there might be something that interferes. Now, the 402 is the easiest way. If you have JavaScript enabled in the browser and you don't want to have this, you know, you want to have this web page that never reloads, you can also trigger a payment with the wallet by doing the right JavaScript invocation. Basically, the extension adds a couple of functions to your page that you could call. But the 402 method tends to be the fastest and most convenient method to trigger it. and it also usually works if JavaScript is disabled. So it works, as far as I can tell, for more people than any other method.
Because I was looking at the settings in my Chrome, settings in the advanced setting, and there is a number of things that could interfere, like use a web service to help resolve navigation errors. That is disabled on my browser, but it might be enabled on by default on Chrome, and that might read any 400 errors and try to present a user-friendly page to the end user instead of presenting the real page that is coming from the server.
That would be very strange for a couple of reasons. 402 is defined as, the body is normal HTML or whatever, so, and this is what the user should see. There's no indication that this is a page that the user shouldn't be seeing. And also the Web Payment Interest Group actually is the one where we got the suggestion from the Web Consortium. We're participating in standardization efforts around electronic payments, that 402 would be a good status code to trigger this. So again, I don't see a reason why web browsers should interfere with this.
I see many reasons for browsers to interfere with simplifying things for the end user, but that is another completely different matter. You might probably need to take care that your extension is putting any hooks before any other hooks or any other extension or the browser itself does in case of navigation errors.
Well, we do install the hook to apply very early on, obviously. I can't say if we put it in front of every other extension right now, but we have not seen any problem with that. The other thing we did study is we looked at statistics on how often HTTP status codes occur on the web today, and 402 pretty much never occurs. Almost nobody is using it. So if you look at millions of HTTP requests, you're likely to find 0 402 requests, at least unless people start using our demo a lot. And so again, why would you interfere with something nobody is using? And the nice thing is it also means that if there is a 402, we pretty much are guaranteed that now we really want to trigger the Thaler logic, which means also the most efficient way to test for us to do anything, and that way the extension does not interfere with normal page load times.
I'm waiting for Randy to come up with the usual title for another podcast that we might do. Shit, Chrome broke this week, but it's always a possibility,
I think it's a particularly pragmatic way of going forward. This just hijacking the 402 for the purpose which it was reserved for in the first purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
I quite like it. It's cool.
If you look on Wikipedia on the HTTP status codes, 402 is expressly defined as payment required, reserved for future use, and there's a mention of GNU Thaler.
We didn't put it. So that's cool.
Yeah, you're mentioned on the HTTP status codes on Wikipedia.
Oh, I missed that. Can you drop a link to that in the IRC?
Absolutely, I will.
Since no one is reading the IRC,
I am.
I had to be absent for a second. Was the question asked about the languages on the API?
No.
Okay. What are the available languages on the API?
The API documentation is currently only in English. We have enough.
How do you talk to it? What are the different
systems? Okay. Sorry, you meant programming languages. I thought you meant documentation languages.
No. Okay. Programming language. Or frameworks or whatever the systems are. How do you talk to it?
So the backend itself is right now written in C code and has a RESTful API. So you talk to the backend over HTTP. And but it also has a C library API with a header, so you can also theoretically just instead of using a RESTful API, just call some C functions, and that if you for some reason don't like the RESTful thing or don't want to implement that yourself and you prefer calling C directly, you could do that as well. And then for the front end, we have tutorials for how to call the RESTful API in Python and PHP, but we do want to eventually have tutorials for other languages. But it's just a question of writing the tutorial for whatever Java, C# and God knows what. And You have to have somebody on the team who reasonably knows how people should do RESTful API requests and how to integrate this in that language and do it in the whatever style of that language. And we welcome contributions to how to write a front end for anything pretty much. But this is not a question of what language is supported, given that if you're writing a web front end and you can't make a RESTful request, okay, you're in a somewhat restricted environment. If you then can't call C code either, okay, maybe pick a different front end for now.
Yeah, Visual Basic. Anyway, definitely a good thing to have examples, but I presume you can test with curl right off. You can test those requests with curl, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I mean, that's something that somebody could do right now if they wanted to, correct?
In principle, yes. It's probably a bit painful.
Yeah. I
mean, the RESTful API just basically uses JSON in the communication, unless it's all in the URL. And have to copy and paste together, your curl request together. It's a bit painful. So,
Some people like that kind of gratification of, hey, I'm talking to the API. I mean, I've done that many times, and I'm sure everybody else has. It's when you're too lazy to actually write the code. Is this thing going to work? And then you start stuffing different values into it and see what happens. Anyway, other questions on IRC? James is faithfully watching the IRC. I don't think anybody's looking at Twitter, but we don't usually get questions there. And YouTube comments are turned off because that is kind of a very basic level of commenting that we don't particularly want to read. Questions? Too bad Maxime isn't here, our Swiss banker, regular.
Well, there don't appear to be anything else on IRC. And I've run out of questions. I don't know about anybody else.
As have I. Christian, are we missing anything? What else is there to say that we haven't said yet, except that you're looking for help in various areas, like translation? What else?
Well, I should mention that we're talking to another very interesting project, namely the Pretty Easy Privacy project, which is trying to make email encryption as easy to use as we make payments easy to use. And so they are basically...
Sorry, that's a fascinating project, because for those of us who've spent many months struggling with PGP, you're absolutely right. It's not easy to use, is it?
No. And the nice thing is Pretty Easy Privacy is compatible to PGP. So if you have figured out PGP and somebody else has Pretty Easy Privacy, you could talk to them over PGP. But basically, if you're familiar with the concept of opportunistic encryption, the idea is if I don't have a man in the middle and I just attach my public key to my first email message, and the other person supports it, then they can just start sending me encrypted messages back. Right? And we don't have to worry about all of this web of trust and key verification and so on. We can do this optionally, additionally, but if there wasn't a man in the middle on the first time, then afterwards we're at least somewhat private, given that we have an encrypted end-to-end channel. So that's the very high-level concept of Pretty Easy Privacy. And obviously there's more, and you can have the PEP people come here to talk to you as well. But the exciting thing is we're talking to them to integrate email payments using Thaler to do email payments with their software. So we're trying, no code has been written, but in principle, you can attach a Thaler payment to an email as well. And if you receive it, then you go to the exchange and say, I got money via email. Great. And the next step that we want to then do is have a policy where you can say, if you're not in the list of people I like, and you send me an unsolicited email, you better attach a 5-cent payment before it comes into my inbox. Otherwise, it ends in my spam folder. And you get this automatic thing coming back saying, hey, the receiver of your email won't read it unless you attach a Thaler payment. And at that point, spam is dead.
Indeed. And I can see that being extended for telephone calls as well. So we can say, if you want to talk to me, you actually have to lodge a bit of payment up front in escrow. And then if I don't like what you're trying to talk to me about, then I keep the money.
And that would put off most unwanted calls anyway.
But I should mention, Thaler can do refunds. So even if you are giving me an anonymous payment, I don't know who you are, I can give you your money back without ever learning who you are, and it has to go back to the person who originally paid me. So in this email scenario, I can say, you know, you pay me €1 for me to read your email. Oh, you're this long forgotten friend from 20 years ago. Oh, let me please refund you your money. I'm very sorry, you know.
Yeah, I like that. I think that potentially has massive uses dealing with spam and spit being the telephony version of spam. So yeah, I could get really enthusiastic about that.
So we've not yet talked to anybody who does voice, but if somebody wants to do this for phone calls,
you are talking to
the infrastructure deep enough to do it, you know.
You are now, because that's what we do.
Communications.
Yeah, we're communications people, and we do voice and messaging and little things like mobile infrastructure. So yeah, it's an interesting thought. I had not considered that before, and that is a particularly useful use case. But in order to make it work, we've got to convince somebody to do some exchanges, the gateways, with real money, so that we can play with real money. So perhaps we're going to have to become an exchange ourselves, perhaps, in order to do that. I don't know.
I don't mind. Just do it. I mean, of course, you have to, for each of these protocols, think about how am I going to attach the payment to the thing. You know, sending the payment requires a bit more bandwidth than what you can fit into an SMS. But you know, an MMS where you have a bit more than 160 characters would be sufficient.
Well, I think it should be possible to embed it into the mobile system, because one thing that mobile networks are very, very good at is making payment settlements between the different networks, and a lot of the complexity in the signaling system is to do with exactly that. And so I believe that a mobile network could set itself up as an exchange for Thaler.
I would never say it couldn't. I have only the impression that developing extensions to mobile standard and getting people to agree on it is typically a very complicated process involving many players and usually lots of patents.
Yeah, that's true, until you meet an outfit like our little outfit who tend to do things internally using open source and free software, but then at the edges you adhere to all the 3GPP standards. That's the way we deal with it. And so
yeah, but then the question is, if I'm past your edge and I'm on the 3GPP thing, how would I pay to be able to call you, right? So that's, I mean, it's the usual problem.
I think the answer to that is we use the standard 3GPP mechanisms for payment on the 3GPP side, and they're pretty well defined and developed. Not particularly efficient, mind, but they're there. So you can,
so you basically you would use a Thaler payment provider and hook that up to the 3GPP payments.
Correct. Yeah, because one mobile network operator can extract funds from another in return for traffic or a service. I mean, that's well defined.
That's very interesting. I should point out one thing here that we skipped so far, which is that the Thaler exchange performs something we call aggregation. So the idea is that you, as a merchant, you know, if you have this website and you're selling articles for 0.1 cents, you know, you don't want to trigger an ACH transaction for every time you sell an article. So what the exchange does by default, it batches payment requests. It says, okay, you know, the merchant can specify, you know, only send me money if it's, you know, after 2 weeks or if it exceeds a certain amount. And so it basically says, okay, I'm going to take all of these microtransactions. And once they have exceeded a certain threshold, then I'm going to send you the 1,000 euros in one big chunk, as opposed to having sent you, you know, 1 cent 10,000 times. And that way we reduce the fees that we would have to charge, because we do one big transaction as opposed to lots of small transactions. And the system has an API to allow you to say, well, I received this one big transaction. Give me a list of all the small transactions you aggregated here. And so in the end, when you withdraw money, you withdraw one large amount over the existing system. And when you pay one large amount of the existing system, thereby aggregating on both ends.
That is incredibly useful. I can see another use case for that, where you have a bi-directional flow of transactions. But what you don't want to raise two invoices, for want of a better word, payment requests going in opposite directions. What you want to do is to subtract the smaller one from the bigger one, and then only issue one payment request. if that makes sense. Because
That
otherwise,
makes sense, except for that you can't do, because again, you don't know who the customer was in that regard, and typically the merchant doesn't, necessarily want to pay with Thaler. But of course, you could.
You're happy that the payments have been made, but we're talking about in the mobile world, it's the inter-operator settlement. You don't want.
Okay, if you have multiple exchanges, they could do that, but that kind of federation protocol we did not implement yet because it also exists. So this kind of inter-exchange settlement thing, you would want to look at Stellar or Ripple, because they effectively do exactly that. So they are a blockchain-based intra-bank settlement system, where it's not about processing tiny payments. How do
you spell Stellar and Ripple?
RIPPLE and STELLAR. So they have effectively been trying to build this kind of system for intra-bank settlements that would replace something like ACH, where you then go and say, okay, between the big providers, we have lots of transactions going back and forth between us. But for the consumer payments, that what we're dealing with, the merchant doesn't usually act as a consumer, right? So in that sense, it doesn't make sense. The flow of money always goes in pretty much one direction. It doesn't go back a lot.
Yes. Yeah, indeed.
So.
Well, Christian, I have to thank you, because you just planted a seed, which I'm going to go away and think about now. This concept, even Randy's getting excited about this now, looking at his comments on IRC. This concept of being able to get people to pay to talk to you again. If you want to talk to me, you have to. Just
people. Strangers to talk to you.
You have to lodge some kind of payment, unless I know you.
Well, in other words, compared to the system where you get the email back going, I have subscribed to the Mashnat system, and you have to email it back. There's that one act that comes back, but still any spammer or anybody can do that. Whereas they're not going to pay when they're sending 1 million emails out. And the same goes for the calls. And you know what? In the United States, I have never in France gotten on my cell ever a prospection call, a spam call, spit call.
Yeah, me neither. That's why spit wasn't quite on my radar. I don't get those. Not to mention, I don't use phones very much. So
Christian, you would get them on fixed lines. We do occasionally get them on fixed lines. And the most popular one, by the way, is a really annoying one that says that the government requires certain things and you have to call this number back. That's such an irritating call. And I'm sure a lot of people have fallen for it. But my point is that here in the United States, I'm starting to get them every day. And every time I change phone numbers, I get more and more. And now the latest thing, we've talked about this on here before, is that they are choosing a local area code to call you in the United States, so that it looks like, oh, this might be somebody. And then you answer it and it's some, are you paying too much for health insurance? And none of these would happen if somebody had to pay the money, because they would be immediately bounced and never come back. Whereas your friends and even the girl in high school from 40 years ago, they're going to pay knowing that they can get it back. This would become common knowledge, of course, that if you're legit, we'll pay your money back.
In fact, for the email system, what we plan to do is very simple. But we just say this: if you pretty much you get the email, and if you within 10 seconds click on the delete button, you keep the money. If you keep reading it for an hour, you refund the money.
That's excellent.
Right?
That's brilliant.
Basically, you can set a threshold, or to say if it's being deleted very quickly, don't pay the money back, and otherwise automatically do pay it back. Yeah. Of course, you can have override buttons in either direction, but you don't have to even think about it. And that would be the culture, right? And if you stay on the phone with your telemarketer for an hour, well, must have been a good call, right? Or if it was your senator calling or whatever. And they know. We just have to actually keep the person engaged for long. But if they hang up on us, it's going to cost us badly.
Yeah.
So that would be the idea, I think, for user interface. Because you don't want to have to go and say, oh, I have to now type in my phone this complicated thing to give you the money back. But if you just go, oh, telemarketer, click. Thank you, I just got rich. Right, so that's how I would do it in the user interface.
Excellent.
Christian, a couple of questions. One just escaped me, but I will be back to that. How does the system scale going to very large amounts of transactions? first. Second, it came back to me. How and where do we set the threshold I want to be paid to get your a call from someone? Would that be to the individual to establish, or would it be a distributed system where everyone more or less has to pay the same to speak with anyone else? How do you see that?
For the email system, the idea was simply that you would configure this in your email client, right? And if you're the president of the United States, you set it to $1 million. And if you're, just me, you might say I'm fine with $5. And that is basically your personal threshold. And of course, you can say, my friends need to be able to pay that upfront and risk it, so to speak. So you don't want to make it too high. On the other hand, you want to make it not so low that you're being annoyed. And I think you can pretty much quickly find out that, oh, yeah, for €1, I wasn't annoyed for that telemarketer call. It was worth it. Right?
Maybe you can.
It turns out are worth more, and then you set it higher.
Sorry, Christian. Sorry, guys. Maybe you can have a white list of people that doesn't have to pay anything.
Oh, of course. But my assumption is that you have some friends that didn't make it into your whitelist, right? And you will always miss out somebody who contacts you that you knew 20 years ago and suddenly found you or whatever. And so you have to pick the threshold not too high to prevent these people from contacting you.
Yeah, and
or I would say their email or phone number as well.
I would see that functionality as being something that the network operator would build into the mobile network as a bit of value added. And then that would, in turn, give the customer a good reason for signing up with that mobile network operator, because you want this protection against spit and spam. Therefore, you will choose this super duper new mobile network operator to do it.
Premium service.
Yeah. And you'd be willing to pay.
Just make sure when you implement an idea, you use Tyler for the settlement, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's locked in my mind. I can't thank you enough for that, Christian. You've actually planted a seed, which I'm really going to go away and think very hard about now, because I can see how.
Let me answer the second question.
Yeah, scalability, please.
Scalability. So the Tyler exchange has to do some crypto when it receives a payment. It's very limited crypto, but you can parallelize it by just just like you set up any web server, just set up 100,000 front ends and you can handle it like Google does, right? Just round robin the traffic over some load balancer, do DNS round robins, whatever techniques exist there for scaling web applications. Similarly, on the backend side, the database has to do a check that there isn't any double spending. But for that, it has to look at the respective coin's public key, and a coin's public key is pretty much as random as we can get, which means we can perfectly shard the database. So again, the database has transactions in it, but each transaction is limited to one hash value, and it's a cryptographic hash value, which means you can say, I can look at the hash value and say, okay, this data center, this machine is responsible for transactions that match this range of the hash space, which means, again, you can achieve perfect scalability on the backend side. And now the biggest complexity you have left is you have to take all of your front ends and shard them against all of your backends. Because when a request comes to a front end, you don't know which backend is going to be yet. So you have to have some, mesh between the front ends and backends. But again, that's still pretty simple. In terms of transaction rates, the number of transactions you can do on a modern machine is extremely high. It's basically the per transaction cost we estimated was like 1 millionth of a dollar, right? So you will be able to run a small data center, and you can run MasterCard, Visa card on this. And the other thing is you do it in one currency. So you would want to run that data center for euros in Europe, for dollars in the US. You don't have one global thing. And I should also mention, all coins, all of the keys in our system expire eventually. As a user, you won't notice, even if the keys for your wallet expire, because the wallet will just use the mechanism to getting changed to get fresh coins and effectively change from the old keys to the new keys. Which means we do not have this problem of an ever-growing database. All transactions can eventually be discarded. The typical duration where we have to keep them is something like 6 years for regulatory reasons, where the government says you have to keep everything for 6 years because it's financial records. But after 6 years, you can discard everything, and it's not like the blockchain where the transaction log will grow forever. So no data has to be kept around forever, and we expect linear scalability for both backends and frontends.
Christian, are you located in? Are you in Europe right now?
I'm in Switzerland right now.
That's what I thought. Well, yeah, I meant the continent. And I'm asking because it looks like it's light outside still. Are you getting hungry or thirsty? Because it's 7:15 or 7:20 there.
It's 7:20. It's okay if you still have questions. So.
Well, I was getting to that. We're actually running. We can keep going if anybody does have any questions, but I was thinking we could also let you go if you wanted to. All right. Any other questions then? Christian's ready to stay for a while. He's making funny signs. No. I think we have kind of extended our session anyway here. Fantastic. Well, this ends on a really beautiful positive note because James has an idea. That's always good and dangerous. And Christian, thanks very much. I know that we had a little initial difficulty making this happen, but you've been a very generous guest with your time. And I appreciate the fact that you did the Hangout.
Well,
so thanks for coming, and do keep in touch.
And don't rush off because we normally have a little after segment where after we cut the live transmission.
Okay.
Indeed.
Thank you for having me. And I'll stay in for a second.
Excellent. Okay, so stick around. We have a mature audiences segment. But before we do, I want to make sure that everybody knows that next week we have the person who is responsible for creating Mastodon. And Mastodon is much more interesting than you think. And it's really expanding daily. There's a huge number of servers, and it's about federation. And these are topics that we are all very interested in. So be there September 1st, same time, same station. Thanks, everybody, for participating, and we will check you on the other side.